When you start to look with a construction business, how do you help them identify their long-term goals and kind of the strategies on how to get there?
I think what is really important is clarity. Clarity equals success. The more clear you are on your business, what you do, who you do it for, how you do it, and all of those things, the more clear you are, the more successful you will be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a special guest, Corley Beatty. She is a consultant for construction industry business owners. Welcome, welcome. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, could you start maybe with sharing a little bit about how you got started in the construction industry and what inspired you to become a consultant?
It's a really long story, so I'm going to give you like the Coles Notes version, which is after 4 years in university taking psychology, criminology, I realized that that really wasn't what I wanted to do in my life. It was very emotionally charged, and it's not something you can leave at the office. And it was something I just realized I couldn't help the people that I wanted to help. I just couldn't identify with them, and so I took a step back and just kind of reconsidered what should I do instead. And an opportunity came up for me at the local school where usually their programs are all full, and this is like the first week in September, and I just happened to call around because my whole life I loved construction, loved it, and I never considered doing it as a career until I realized what I thought I wanted to do wasn't it. So, in sort of evaluating what I wanted to do, I was like, well, why don't I look into the school? And they sure enough had space. And so I quit university, I quit my job, I quit everything. And like within 4 days, started on a new path in construction. And that was in the mid 90s. And since then, I've been, I started as a building envelope consultant for a multinational engineering firm. I did that for 10 years. I had a construction business with my husband. He's a plumber by trade. So we had a mechanical contracting business for 15 years. And we sold that just over 6 years ago now. And when we sold that, I was just like, well, what do I want to do next? And it was a journey. It was a long journey of some very dark, hard days just after selling my business and not really knowing who I was outside of my business was very difficult. It probably took me about 2 years to really figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And that in itself was a journey because first I thought I wanted to just, help women. And then I wanted to help women business owners. And then I wanted to help women business owners in construction. And then I wanted to help, so it's this evolution of what it is that, where I fit. And then, it kind of came full circle because finally I chose that I wanted to work with women business owners in the construction industry because I could identify with them very clearly. I was one of them. And I was like, this is where I belong. And so even that has evolved because I don't work with just women business owners anymore. I do work with men in different capacities. I do focus on, like, I have a community group for women where it's like, we're all alike because oftentimes we are one of one, whether you are, a business owner or just being a worker on site, whatever it happens to be, whatever your position is in the industry, you're not surrounded by a bunch of women. So I did build a community for women business owners and leaders in the construction industry. So we are all like-minded, working together to help each other build businesses. So I do have that component that I leave for women. And within the work that I do work with women and men in their businesses. Is that a short story?
Good to know. Um, so what kind of projects do you usually work with? If somebody was going to reach out to you, what kind of problems in general do they come?
So often what happens is that, and this is what happened with me and the reason why I got into doing what I do, because, you take your skill and your talent within your trade and you start a business because you want to do things differently, you want to do things better, and you see that there's a path for you to have a better life doing things and serving people the way you want to. And then what you don't know is the business side of all of it. And, you start to build your business and at some point it will take over your life if you don't build it with intention. So, people that come to me are often overwhelmed, overworked, underrested, and really on the brink of burnout. Like they just can't do everything anymore on their own and they need help. So even if they have a small team, because my clients are, have teams as well. Even if they have a small team, they're still taking on a lot of the responsibility themselves. Everything comes back to them. So even if you have people doing the administrative work, for example, they keep coming to you to solve their problems, and they haven't been able to effectively delegate and give ownership of tasks and roles to their people. And so everything still comes back to them. There's no weekends, there's no days off, there's no vacations. Those are all nice ideas. I know for me, I used to buy vacations for my people because I couldn't take vacations myself. So I'm like, well, I might as well send them on a nice vacation. So that was a problem.
So, in your experience, what are the most like critical elements of a solid business plan for a construction company? Like I know we talked about the importance of setting up goals in the past, and
Mm.
can you walk me through like how what are those elements that you have to have in order to have a successful business plan?
I think what is really important is clarity. Clarity equals success. The more clear you are on your business, what you do, who you do it for, how you do it, and all of those things, the more clear you are, the more successful you will be. And what that starts with is understanding your mission, your vision, and your values. To me, that is the foundation of your business operations because that is the thing that dictates who you work with, how you do your work, why you do your work, all of those things. Like that's kind of the foundation. Those are the things that you can go back to when you're having your hard days because even the good days are often very hard. So that is the foundation and really owning why you are starting a business. Why are you doing this? Because it's probably not for the money. They might say that in the beginning, but if you really work down to like why is this important to them, that is really key to understanding and getting through the hard days. So that's the foundation. And your values is the thing is that's like your North Star. That is what directs how you do your work, who you do it with, and what's important to you. Also helps you hire people. When you hire in accordance with your values, then you're finding people that are sharing the same way of doing things or are on the same page as you. You're not, fighting against the way you want something done versus the way they are used to doing or the way they will do something. Values is really important to in using those to hire and build your team. So that's kind of the starting point. And then things that beyond that, what's really important to understand is who you're working for. So, there's kind of a debate between niching down if you niche down into, very specific work that you do versus, doing everything for everybody. And when you market to everybody, you're marketing to no one, which means nobody's going to actually identify with your message because it's so broad. You want to be so specific and know your ideal client so well that when you're doing your marketing and your messaging, they read that or hear that and they are like, they are in my head. They think that you're in your head and completely understand what it is that they are challenged with and what the problems are that they have. So, really understanding who it is that you want to work for is critical in creating your marketing messaging and really being successful in attracting who is your ideal client. And then also the work that you do. For us, for example, we did plumbing, heating, gas, air conditioning, ventilation. We did everything, hydronic heating as well as forced air heating. And then we did it in commercial, or not sorry, commercial, mostly residential, some light commercial. We did new construction, renovations, install. We did way too much. Like we had way too much going on. The more specific you can be with the work that you do, the more successful you will be because you just have to figure out one way of doing things and get really good at that. And that is where the money is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say my most successful clients, they are very specific about who they serve and what they do for them. It's not
Hmm.
spread out. I had a client who used to do plumbing for commercial, for residential. Then he realized that he can also do some drywall and build out closets.
Mm.
He had all of that, like all that information on his website, right? And
Yeah.
he positioned himself as a cheap handyman that
Hmm.
way. So then anyone who is price shopping, you know, was calling him and he was trying to raise his markup so it at least covers his overhead. And he wasn't able to, get the job because he's just all over the place. When I went into his website, and I'm not a marketing person, but I'm like, come on, this is what I'm trying to tell you. You gotta pick a niche. Are you residential or are you commercial? Are you doing
Hmm.
plumbing or what are you doing? Like, I understand some renovations, but even with renovations, you can niche to only kitchens, only bathrooms. You
Yeah.
need to separate your projects and see maybe at the beginning you don't know what you want to do, right? Separate your projects, track your numbers and see what brings you the most profit margins and focus on that if you
Yes.
love to do it all. So, when you start to look with the construction business, how do you help them identify their long-term goals and kind of the strategies on how to get there?
Mhm. So, depending on what capacity I'm working with them, as a fractional COO, I actually work alongside them to build their vivid vision. As a consultant, where they're doing most of the work and I kind of just consult and coach them, I encourage them to build their vivid vision. Vivid Vision is a book that was authored by Cameron Harold. Do you have a copy of it?
Right here.
Yes, that one.
Don't have to read it yet, though.
Oh, really? It's
Yeah,
such a quick read. I read that in like a couple of days. It's very quick read,
I've heard that.
and
Great,
yeah,
great.
to start there is really a game changer because again, it comes back to clarity. It's like you are telling your future self 3 years from now, like what that future is in 3 years. You can explain it so clearly as though it was happening today. Like that's how clear you want to be, and that's really what you're building. And this isn't just a a vision statement. This is like a 4 or 5 page document that takes each area of your business, of your life, whatever it happens to be. You can do one for personal as well as your business. Your financial, your marketing, your people, all of the different aspects of your business, and get really specific about what you want it to look like in 3 years. In doing that, what you're in essence doing is creating goals. You're saying like each statement kind of turns into what would otherwise be a goal and something that you can work very tangibly on. Like you can say that this is something that I want to achieve and this is what we have in place and what do we need to do to reach that goal. So that's where I start. I get my clients to do a vivid vision. I say this in that because where I actually start with my clients is their most pressing need. Like we work on what's pressing now to get them to a point where they can actually breathe. So when they can breathe, we start with a vivid vision. And then from there, we kind of create the goals based on that vivid vision. And then we just work backwards. So if in 3 years' time, you want to have a certain sized office, for example, if that's in 3 years, where do we have to be in 2 years? And where do we have to be in 1 year? And then each quarter of the first year. So what are we working on? And then we break it down by the months. What do we need to achieve? So we work backwards. We start with the 3 year goal and then work backwards to what we need to be doing in this quarter, this month, and on a daily basis to meet that goal.
For those companies who are, they think they're in a pretty good place, but they are struggling to grow. What kind of strategies would you recommend for them to start scaling their operations?
Most people have a problem growing, or at least this has certainly been my experience with my clients. The problem with growing is a lack of processes. When you can get processes in place where your business is run by the processes and your people run the processes as opposed to your people running your business, when it's the processes, then you're actually able to scale. And that is where most people fall because they don't have the processes in place. Everything is in their head. So I work through, we basically map out a client journey, like from the very first time somebody learns about you to the time you're handing over the key and beyond where you are doing maintenance or, for further nurturing of that client. We map out that whole journey, what happens at each milestone along the way, and then break it up and create the details in between. And each point, whatever you need to have in place. So is it a checklist? Is it a template? Is it, some sort of automation? What do you need to have in place at that point so that it is taken care of? Everybody knows what's happening and nobody has to come to you to ask the questions. And that's kind of how we map it out and that's how we address it. Now, when we do that, we get mapping it out, that client journey gives you an idea of what it is that you're working on as far as creating processes. I always recommend to start in real time. So if you're documenting something, for example, if you're generating an invoice or entering data or you're on site doing a specific walkthrough, just record it in real time as you're doing it. And that in itself can be used for training or to document your processes so that it can be shared with other people. To start at the beginning and go to the end and go through like 187 different processes plus, like there's a lot that you can do, is overwhelming. So, and oftentimes people just stall on the start. They don't even get going. So it's just like, let's just start with the work you're doing in real time and just start somewhere. And then you kind of get momentum and then you can fill in the blanks.
And systems and processes is some every business owner realizes they have to have them. But as soon as they start thinking, I gotta build them out, it's like a complete shutdown because they're
Yes.
doing so many things at the same time.
Yeah.
And of course, you want to take care of something pressing, like send out invoice or talk to a
Hmm.
potential client or existing client. And that is always on the back burner. So it's kind of like almost like a circle of events, right? I can't do the process because don't have time, but I would have had time if I had those processes. So it's like at some point you have to just, I don't know, pick some time and sit down, like you said, record what you're doing, create an SOP out of there, and decide if you want to automate or delegate. Because you
Hmm.
can't, yes, you probably do amazing things yourself and you're afraid to delegate it to another person because they're not going to do 100% just like you would have done it. But I like how
Mm.
my coach Dan Martell says, he says,
Yes.
50% done by somebody else is 100% awesome.
Yes.
So I totally agree with that.
Yes.
You gotta be focused on that. Do you have
I
any
agree.
like success story of like a construction company that successfully implemented a growth strategy that you proposed to them?
Yeah. So one of my clients, to me, success is having my client be able to breathe, take a step back, and kind of let their business operate without them. And one of my clients, specifically that I'm thinking of, she was doing everything in her business. Everything, and, she had a team, but people kept coming back to her, so she had people in the office, but again, just like I said in the beginning, that problem is very common. Everybody's coming back to her to answer all the questions. So we started putting some processes in place, and when the processes started getting in place, the team was actually involved. I always recommend including your team. Don't build the processes on your own, because especially if, you're not the one doing the work, if you think it should be done a certain way and somebody else is doing it a different way, um, that can be very difficult because if you have an administration person doing something that you think is they're doing one way, they're doing it another way successfully, and you document it your way and she's training it another way, then that becomes a problem. So always include the people actually doing the work in creating the processes. Even if you think your way's better, then work together to come up with something that's more efficient. So, notwithstanding, so she was, putting her processes in place and having her people help her build those processes, and she found that it's like all of a sudden she didn't know what to do with her time because she's like, "Oh, I have time," and, things started we could actually start, working on strategy for her because things that were running her day to day, all the emergencies weren't as emergent or weren't as much of emergency or weren't coming back to her or being able to be handled by other people. So she found that she had a lot more time on her hand and could actually start working on the strategy. So it is really important. And that is what I see commonly. That's just sort of the one that's most frequent or the most recent. Um, and that is kind of to me what success is that my business owners that I work with start to have more time and then they don't know what to do with their time. When you don't know what to do with your time, I'm like, all right, we're winning here. So yes. And then don't worry, we fill the time with other more productive things, but it's good.
Yeah, things that are actually profit generating activities, not just some busy work.
Exactly. Yes.
Now, I know that a lot of guys that I talk to, at least, are struggling with staying, like ensuring that projects are staying completed on time and with
Mm,
budget.
mm.
Is there any strategy that you think is the best to improve that project management side of business?
Ultimately, success comes down to one, clarity. Again, I always think that that's your starting point. And clarity comes from planning ahead of time. Like, don't jump onto a job site and start it. Like, that job starts well before you get on your site. Like, you know, even before the pre-construction planning stuff, you're doing things that is just understanding, how your company operates, what you're like, the information that you work with your clients, like just understanding your numbers, understanding your labor, understanding your materials, like just understanding your costs so that when you are putting together a budget, putting together a schedule, putting together, talking to your subtrades, all of the things that you need to do to create a schedule, a budget, to run a project successfully, is just understanding everything that I'm not going to say understanding everything that could come up, because we all know that in construction, there's always surprises, but limiting the surprises is what you can do just by planning ahead, understanding, communicating with your client, communicating with your team, having them know what it is that they're getting into, what the expectations are. Having these conversations well before you get onto your construction site is really important. And I know because I went through it. I know how incredibly difficult it is to take the time to have those conversations, to have those meetings when you're just running to the next project and the next project's coming up and you just have to get people on it. Taking the time to set them up for success is really setting everybody up for success. That, your clients, your people, the project. So yeah, clarity, planning, and doing it ahead of time in advance. Don't plan on the fly, please, as much as you can.
Yeah, I like that. What advice would you give to someone just starting a construction business?
Make sure your books are set up properly.
Yeah.
That's you, yes. Um, I think that is, I think the number one problem I see with my clients is that they have no idea what's happening with their books. They don't understand their numbers, and they are flying by the seat of their pants, and it's just like, oh, there's money in the account and I need a new van, so I'm gonna just buy a van. Like there's no planning, there's no understanding, there's no foresight, there's very little understanding. So really understanding your numbers and setting your books up properly from the beginning is huge. I don't think you could over prepare yourself for that part of your business, because ultimately, if you don't have good cash flow, if you don't have good books, if you don't understand your numbers, you will not be successful. That will be your downfall, because managing your money needs to be something that you understand. That is probably the biggest tip.
I didn't ask her to say that.
No, 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 you did not. It
But
is the truth.
yeah, I mean, I do agree. I have been having a lot of conversations with just people who are starting up. I feel like the message is out there for people to realize the importance of, starting things up from the right place. And I'm getting a lot of just startup companies that want to do things right. They're like, I want the setup
Mm,
ready before I sign up my first project. I want to track it correctly. I want to understand what our numbers are, if the project is successful, if I'm making any money, what's our overhead. I want to build out a budget. I'm like, yes, yes, it's changing. Year after year is getting better and better.
mhm.
How can
Yes.
listeners and anybody who's watching can learn about your work and get in touch with you?
I'm on most platforms, Coralie Beatty. I'm very easy to find because I'm one of one, as I expect you probably are as well. I don't know. Or my website, thrivehq.ca. Those are probably the best two places.
Perfect. I will link those in the comments below. Thank you so much, Carly, for joining us. I feel like that provided good value for whoever is watching.
Well, thank you very much for having me.